But let's get back to earnings then. Your transport corp that came out with a set of numbers, it looked a little bit weakish. To understand what went on in the past quarter, what's the way ahead, more importantly, Mr. Vineet Agarwal joins us on the show. Hi, Vineet. Good morning and good to see you in as always. Well, the numbers looked a little bit weakish, but it appears the street wants to look ahead because the stock is still up close to around 4.5%. So let's talk about the path from here on. I recall you telling us that revenue growth for the year should be in that vicinity of around 10 to around 15%. However, at the 9-month mark, it's close to around 5 to 6%. Do you want to revise that number, firstly, in terms of revenue growth for this year, as well as FY'25? How are things shaping up?
Yes. Hi, Nigel. Hi, Mangalam. I think what has happened is that the softening in on the core sector has had a bit of an impact in the last few quarters, last 1 or 2 quarters. We were seeing some trends of slowing down from a manufacturing perspective, and that got reflected a little bit in the Q3. As you can see that logistics and transportation is an anticipator, rather a barometer of what's going to come in the future, because this is where products are moving or raw materials are moving and so on. So we do see that weakening playing out till the next quarter also, though the Q4 is always the strongest quarter for us. So I think, yes, we would look at a slight downward revision from 10 to 15%, maybe about 8 to 10% from a top line perspective, and similarly for the bottom line perspective. Also, the other factor is that last year we had some of our businesses, like the shipping business, had high freight rates, and that has come off, and we knew that it will come off. So that has had some impact on the top line as well.
All right. So 10 to 15% revenue growth guidance has been marginally revised lower to around 8 to 10% itself. Vineet, we'll speak about the shipping business in just a bit, but I wanted to talk a little about your freight business as well. Could you tell us what was the volume growth in your freight business? Also, give us a split between your full truckload and less than 1 truckload sort of business as you recognize it. And what's the outlook here?
So less than truckload is closer to about 37% of the freight business. And we are trying to get that to 40% of the freight business. FTL, which is the, moving large trucks together at one time, that's about 63%. And, we don't share numbers in terms of volume growth, but again, the growth in terms of the revenues has been flat on Q3 basis. Again, this is some sectors like the engineering and some of the infrastructure sectors have been a little weak in this quarter. Even some impact of the high inflation has played on a few other areas, for example, in some of the textile stocks and textile companies and so on. So new capex has started to happen, but the play out of that capex is going to be seen when this division really has that more of an impact when it comes to growth coming from infrastructure as well as engineering sector.
I would assume that LTL is a higher margin business, right?
That's right. So FTL is at approximately 10% gross margin, whereas LTL is at 20% gross margin. So the more we grow that business, the margin structure will automatically change.
Okay, let's talk about margins then. Since you took us to that point, tell us what is the margin guidance, across segments if I look at it, whether it's freight, supply chain, we have seen some kind of compression, even seaways. So individually, if you could break it up segment-wise, what can you guide from here on? There has been some compression, but are things looking up from here on? If yes, what would the guidance be?
So again, the start of the year, the guidance was about 10 to 15% also on the bottom line. But again, I think we'll moderate at about 8 to 10% year as well, simply because the seaways margin is coming down. This was again predicted that it will. What has impacted is the freight business that, as I mentioned, that because of the weak top line growth impacted the revenue, the margin growth. But what has done well for us is the supply chain business, and where we move a lot of automotive cargo, whether it is on the finished goods side or on the raw material side, which is inbound and outbound logistics. And that has done very well. So that should keep up the growth momentum, and hence we should look at about 8 to 10% on the bottom line in terms of guidance for the full year.
All right. And margins so far in this year have been around 10%. In FY'22, you said it was abnormally high because of the freight rates, etc. as well. It was close to around 13%. So on an EBITDA, steady state EBITDA basis, is 11 to 12% a reasonable estimate?
I would say 10 to 11% is more reasonable because that's sort of, you also are constantly investing for the future. So like we have a capex plan of 275 crores for this financial year and subsequently 275 crores for the next financial. So that means that the EBITDA will be a little at between the 10 to 11% range.
All right, final question then. The cold chain business, earlier you targeted about 90 crores revenue in FY'24. Where do you stand at the 9-month mark? And even the TCI chemical logistics business, is this a part of Transport Corp as you reported? What's the potential here?
So the cold chain business is doing reasonably well. I think we'll be very close to that target of 90 crores. The business, we're seeing a lot of positive growth from companies in the QSR business, from specialty chemicals, etc. And we just added 75 new trucks in that business as well. On the chemical side, it's right now a division of one of the one of the divisions. It's not really a full-fledged business, but over time, we think that there is a lot of potential for chemical logistics in the country to really become more organized and become more of a, India with the China +1 strategy is getting a benefit on the chemical side. So this we think will play out quite well for the logistics of chemicals in India.
All right, Vineet, always good to see you in, and looking forward to chatting up with you at the end of next quarter. You're sounding quite optimistic about prospects, and we'll do a check with you the next time you join in. Wishing you a good day ahead.